who are going to make historical reflections, brief reflections. This is our 85th anniversary. Who are we? We are a church that began in 1919 from a group of people who migrated to Detroit from Montgomery, Alabama. Descendants of and beneficiaries of the American Missionary Association, which was actually born out of the Amistad. Many of you remember that story. Our church sponsored the replica of the Amistad that was here 2 years ago. But we are literally in that historical connection. And our church began in 1919 in a very humble way with a handful of people in a house on St. Alban and Antietam. That's where the tennis courts are, over near where Joe Muir's used to be, the big vacant lot. That's where our church began, in a house, the home of Carrie Thompson. From there, our church began to grow. It bounced around in the early days, but then it found a home in the back room of First Congregational Church on Woodward at Forest. And every time I go into that back room for small programs now, I get a chill, just like I do when I walk through the slave quarters in the French Quarter of New Orleans. I say, our people have been here before. That's how I feel when I'm in the back room at First Congregational Church. But from there, our church continued to grow, and it bought property, a former Jewish synagogue on 514 Garfield Street, which is really Garfield-Bobian. You wouldn't know it today because it's the medical center area, but it's the southwestern corner of the parking deck for Hutzel Hospital. That was our church property. The city took our church for a parking deck. And I've never quite really forgotten that. But those were good years. Those were the Horace White years. And the church was known as a center for social activism. After Horace White, my father became the pastor in 1958, and it continued. We were one of the northern sites for fundraising for the SCLC. We played a role in those days. Andrew Young and others would come through the church. Had big rallies there, and it was a very exciting period, and I was very proud as a child to see our church play this kind of role. It was also during this period in the 60s and 70s that our church had to face the decision of where do we move. When Garfield Street was slated to be demolished, under our pastor emeritus leadership, the church decided in its best wisdom that the best place to stay was as close to the original property. So they bought this property and acquired property for 43 acres going south. And in that 43 acres, we developed housing for the low and moderate income individuals. The whole 43 acres, if you go out the door here and look toward Mack Avenue, as far as you can see, as long as you don't look up, you will see housing that was developed by our church. If you look to the left, you see the Cyprian Center, developed as the first center for the mentally handicapped in the Detroit region to help people who had mental disabilities who were at the lowest level of functioning. In 1960, our church, under our pastor emeritus leadership, created a preschool. And out of that little humble preschool, we incorporated in 1985, but out of that very humble beginning, we sowed the seeds for what now is the Plymouth Educational Center. It's a